right, it's 7 o'clock. Looks like we have the crew here that's going to be here tonight. I'm going to call to order the Wednesday, August 4th, 2021 Royal Oak City Commission special meeting to order. Item number 2, here's a roll call, but what I'll do is I'll just ask, starting with Commissioner Hunt, just for everyone to go around the table, the commissioners at least, and introduce themselves.
Monica Hunt, present. Charlene Douglas, present.
Kyle Dubak, present.
Mike Fournier, present.
Pat Perouge, present.
Brandon Cole, present.
All right, and Commissioner Macy is on vacation, a planned vacation with her family, and she could not attend this evening. She is out of state. So we're going to move to item 3, which is the approval of the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion? Commissioner Colo, you move the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Perouche. Discussion on the agenda tonight. Okay, with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, this brings us to item 4. There's been a request to adjourn to closed session to discuss attorney-client privileged information pending litigation of Save the Veterans Memorial versus Melanie Hallis, City Clerk for the City of Royal Oak et al. Oakland County Circuit Court Case number 2021 1881-67 AW. Is there a motion? Motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Dubak. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, with none, I'm going to call for the vote. We'll start with Commissioner Douglas.
Yes.
Commissioner Dubak.
Yes.
I vote yes. Commissioner Perouche.
Yes.
Commissioner Colo.
Yes.
And Commissioner Hunt.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to adjourn to closed session. When we're done, we'll come right back out and continue the meeting.
70% of pedestrian deaths happen outside of a crosswalk. Make eye contact with drivers. Distractions are deadly. Use a crosswalk. Learn more at walkbikedrivesafe.org.
All right, I think we got everybody that's here tonight. So we're going to resume the public portion of this meeting. So this brings us to item 7, which is the approval of the initiation of proposed ordinance preserving and protecting the Royal Oak Veterans War Memorial for placement on the November 2nd, 2021 municipal election ballot. Are you having a hard time hearing?
I'm having a hard time.
Okay, let's do another. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, maybe they turned down the sensitivity because I'm a loud talker. All right, did you guys hear that? Want me to repeat the agenda item again? Yeah, you guys got it? Okay, so we're at item number 7. We resumed the meeting, and item number 7 is approval of initiation of proposed ordinance preserving and protecting the Royal Oak Veterans War Memorial for placement on the November 2nd, 2021 municipal election ballot. Good? All right, thank you for that feedback. Sorry, I'll get this better positioned. All right. So, who's going to kick it off for us? I don't know, maybe Mr. Leal or...
No. Go ahead. I'll go ahead. Members of the commission, Mayor, members of the commission, what you have before you is a proposed ordinance that was submitted as an initiative petition to place on the ballot for the November election. And that item is now before you to consider about placing, authorizing this petition to be placed on the November 2nd, 2021 ballot. That's basically it.
Okay.
And Paul, is there anything else you want to add? Or no?
Any questions to staff? Commissioner DeBuck?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, obviously, there's been a bit of wrangling over this. Some court decisions. I'm wondering if we can get maybe a summary from council clarifying.
Mike.
Can you hear me now? Wow, these were super sensitive at our last meeting.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of wrangling over this. Clearly some court action, a lot of misinformation regarding the city's position around this ballot initiative. So I'm wondering if we could get a report from council regarding the litigation and the city's position regarding the petition as it was presented to the city.
Good evening, Commissioners. Everyone can hear me out there, is that correct? All right. Good evening. Chris Trebilcock from Clark Hill, one of the attorneys outside counsel representing the city in this litigation. As you know, this was presented and it was rejected for the ballot based on not the signatures, but rather the form and the substance of the petition for its failure to comply with the Home Rule Cities Act as well as Michigan election law. The proponents of the petition filed a writ of mandamus complaint in Oakland Circuit Court. We briefed that matter there. The Oakland Circuit Court ruled that the only provision of the Royal Oak City Charter that mattered or could be applied was Chapter 6 of the city charter, and Chapter 6 is limited to just counting signatures. That is contrary to the Home Rule City Act. It's contrary to existing published Court of Appeals law, and it is also contrary to Chapter 4 of the city charter that says Michigan election law controls anything not specifically specified in the city charter. The city charter does not specify what the form of the petitions should be, the heading of the petition, and other things, so that would lead you to the default. Based on that, those arguments and others, we appealed that decision after the circuit court ordered the clerk to certify the petition and then present it to you as City Council. We appealed that decision on an expedited basis to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, without oral argument, reviewed the briefing and found that the Royal Oak City Charter did not limit what language could be used in petition headings. It also found that there was no limitation on the number of sponsors that could be listed on the petition, and it said that the city clerk could not review the substance of the reason or the petition summary that was placed on there, and so there was no decision by the Court of Appeals on whether that had to be accurate or could be misleading or any of those things, which were the basis of the reason why originally the opinion was, and the reason for the rejection was the form of the summary. So the Court of Appeals on Friday issued that opinion, and that's where the decision is appealed, or why this the proposed ordinance is now presented to you, because the Court of Appeals has denied the appeal. The option would be to file an application to the Supreme Court on an expedited basis and try to get a decision to change that if that was the will of the council or the commission.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm one of those at the table who's not an attorney, so I just want to make sure that my understanding is accurate. That the issue that we brought was that there is state law that seeks to ensure transparency of ballot initiatives, integrity of ballot initiatives, as they are gathering signatures, by saying the summary must accurately represent what the ordinance does. And there's objectively things in this summary that misrepresent what the ordinance does, but because our charter does not require the summary to adequately represent the ordinance, we had no, that's what was ruled against us. Is that what I'm understanding?
Oh, yeah, according to the Court of Appeals, that's correct. So state law if you were doing a petition, and there's been a lot of ballot initiatives that have been in the news, I've been counsel fighting those. The Board of Canvassers actually has to approve the ballot language, and they review and revise it to make sure that it's accurate and reflects the content and the intent and the effect of the petition, so that electors are informed of what the petition is. That's a requirement under long-standing state law, and that's a requirement. The Court of Appeals, I disagree with their reasoning, said the Royal Oak City Charter doesn't require that, and so you can essentially put whatever you want in a petition summary.
Okay, so because our charter does not afford that protection to residents and voters, you can put whatever you want in a summary, but then the actual language being enacted could be different.
Court of Appeals said it's a matter of pure local concern.
Okay, and so the court has no opinion on the objective differences between that summary and what the ordinance would actually do.
They did not issue an opinion on that at all.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Perush.
The Court of Appeals also didn't give an opinion on any of the substantive issues within the ordinance. And I know that there has been some discussion about some of the particular language in both the summary and the ordinance language itself, specifically about prohibited use or prohibited other uses. In the summary, it says any other uses are prohibited other than for the specific area or the specific use for memorial activities. And then the language of the ordinance itself is pretty much the same. And then it gives a description of the legal description, which essentially goes from Troy Street all the way to where William Street is, from the library steps all the way down to the police parking lot line that used to be there. That's the area that we're talking about, which includes the Star Dream Fountain. So in my view, and I think in your view, if this ordinance were to pass, then the use of that enlarged area, including the Star Dream Fountain, for anything other than memorial activities would be prohibited. Is that still your opinion, that it's that restrictive?
Based on the plain language of the proposed ordinance, yes.
Okay. So anything like library story hours or even somebody just sitting there having a picnic, the language is strict enough so that you couldn't use this area for anything other than essentially Memorial Day activities. Because it doesn't say veterans, it says memorial.
Yeah, that's the plain language of the ordinance as presented, and that will be proposed to voters.
Okay.
Any of those other uses are strictly prohibited.
Okay. And that of course, strict prohibit language, the meaning of that certainly isn't in the summary, because the summary can only be so long. So,
100 words.
So the implications, if this were to pass, is far beyond just what the 100-word summary is that's going to be on the ballot.
Yes, that's often the case, and why there's battles over what the summary is and whether it's accurate or not. And in this case, the Court of Appeals didn't even consider whether or not it was accurate. At the state level, there's a requirement, and it's a constitutional requirement, that if you have a ballot initiative that's going to repeal or modify legislation, which in effect this ordinance does, you have to specifically cite the provisions or the law that will be repealed or abrogated. This summary did not do that, and that's one of the reasons, again, why we believed that it was deficient based on the form. Nothing to do with the intent or that. It's just the form of the petition and the substance of how the description is. So at the state level, those are requirements. The Court of Appeals construed the charter and the Home Rule City Act as saying it's exclusively within the Royal Oak City Charter, and they relied solely on Chapter 6 of the Royal Oak City Charter.
Okay, so that even though the public seems to have the perception that they're going to have this enlarged area as a public park, realistically, if they're to pass, they lose about 20% of that area for public recreation use. It would have to be strictly confined to memorial activities.
That's my understanding. It's about 20%, and that the plain language restricts that 20% to use for memorial purposes exclusively, dedicated to memorial activities honoring fallen soldiers.
Okay. So even veterans it's even narrower than the word veterans, which could even be my husband who's a veteran and he's not deceased. Memorial means those who are deceased, so it would be even more limited.
That certainly could be, that certainly is a reasonable interpretation of the restrictive language in the ordinance, that's right.
Okay. So the bottom line is the Court of Appeals didn't give any opinion whatsoever on the sloppy language that's in the ordinance that could be passed.
No, they didn't consider the substance of the language at all.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And the one thing I would just add, I think was part of your question, Commissioner Perush, is the substance of the ordinance and the deficiencies that exist when the ordinance weren't really present at this time under longstanding Michigan election law. Even if passed, there's lots of legal challenges that this ordinance presents, and there's private entities that could challenge the effect of the ordinance, particularly a lot of the businesses and developers that were in the area.
And Henry Ford that has, the right to, sponsor the park and so on and so forth. Their legal standing would be impaired by the passage of this ordinance.
Yeah, so you can certainly see the potential for legal challenges afterwards, and that's the courts have said the time for challenges to the substance of the ordinances is after if a ballot proposal becomes certified as passed.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner DeBoe?
Yeah, just on that same train of thought, the petition is designed to challenge a decision that was made after about 2.5 years of public input with final design in 2019, final approval in the end of 2019, and then contracts signed throughout 2020. So the court, as you said, this opens up all sorts of legal ramifications if this is enacted, and the court has not considered any of that.
No, we didn't raise those in the litigation. And the court would have not considered those had we, because they would say, look, we're not deciding those until if it passes.
Okay. So there are a lot of legal problems with the sloppy language that's been brought forward that haven't really considered the impact on the city or the space, or actually how the ordinance needs to be enforced should it be passed.
On my review and my legal opinion, yes, there are many challenges that the substance could face if it's passed, and then I do believe there's a lot of enforcement questions that the city is going to have to face administratively if it becomes passed. If it passes in November, and any legal challenges to the substance finally get litigated in court, which can take years on these things, there's still some administrative enforcement decisions and how you practically enforce the ordinance as passed.
Okay, so the ruling was that even if ballot language misrepresents the actual ordinance to those signing, and the language itself is actually fundamentally legally flawed, we still need to put it on the ballot and then sort it out later.
Yeah, that's correct. And the courts, there's other decisions, and we didn't challenge these things. You've seen challenges in the past where you argue that, look, the voters were lied to, or it was misrepresented in verbal communications and things like that, and the courts often reject those. You didn't see any challenges to signatures and the quality of signatures or duplicate signatures and all those things. Clerk House did a good review. That's not saying her review of signatures were invalid or anything like that, but often in litigation over ballot initiatives, you see those types of challenges. Those weren't made in this case.
Right. Yeah, I don't think anyone's questioning whether or not people signed. I think the question is, if you got people to sign a petition to outlaw firearms in the city of Royal Oak and people passed it, we would not be able to enforce that.
Correct.
Okay.
So maybe going back to a detail that I heard under Commissioner Perush's discussion, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. I mean, I've read the language a number of times, and again, one of the, I used to say few non-attorneys up here, but I think, it's pretty balanced now. like when I read the section that talked about exclusive use, and it talks about, fallen members of, the armed forces, and it lists it. And Commissioner Prush brought it up, but I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. That would apply to Veterans Day. Am I not mistaken? I mean, that's if you interpret the language as it's laid out on the paper, that doesn't fall under the category of memorial, let alone, I mean, we talked about reading programs, people walking through, passing through, walking, picnicking, whatever. But that, to me, surprised me. And I just want to understand that that is a very reasonable interpretation, in your opinion, that the city would have to only restrict it to Memorial Day activities and not activities honoring veterans that are still alive and things of that nature.
As drafted, the ordinance talks about memorial activities, and that the grounds will be limited to memorial activities, and exclusively memorial activities. So a policy would have to be put into place in terms of how you're going to permit uses, how you're going to police prohibited uses, how you're going to enforce that. Are there going to be fines associated with that? There's going to be lots of things that go along with the ordinance.
Because I've been for 5 years as mayor, 10 years as commissioner. I mean, it's always an important thing that folks understand that Memorial Day is about those we lost, and Veterans Day is about those who served and are alive. And clearly there's a distinction there, and that gives me a little bit of pause and concern. But Commissioner Dubuck.
Sure. I think one more issue that we noticed with the language, which again the court has not ruled on, is that it essentially gives any citizen right of action to sue the city if they feel that the ordinance is not being appropriately followed. Now, a couple years ago, we had a piece of art on the dedicated land that upset some people because it was not specific to recognizing the fallen or honoring our veterans. Now, the Star Dream Fountain is within that dedicated space. So if this were passed, any citizen of Royal Oak could then sue us to move the Star Dream Fountain. Is that accurate?
100%.
And the ordinance would require that we do so.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a section of this ordinance that actually discusses repayment of funds to private individuals from a move, I believe in 2007. If this were to pass, would we have to, that move has nothing to do with this ordinance, in fact, would we have to repay funds to private citizens?
According to the language of the ordinance, there would be a 2-year period after the effective date of the ordinance, if it were to pass, within which people could make claims for reimbursement of the monies they donated at that time. That provision is also subject to a legal challenge, but on its face, that is what the ordinance would require.
So that money that could be used for veteran events, parks, etc., would have to be repaid. Does it have anything to do with the location of the monument?
If the monument was moved after December 31st, 2020, which it has been, of course, then those provisions for reimbursement apply.
Yes.
So
and
yes,
this
so
is
the answer is
completely
yes.
punitive, though, correct?
Well, yes, I mean, it's intended to take some type of retribution against the city for moving it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I just want clarity. So if the ordinance passes, it says in general the language that the city has to move it back to the exact location that it was before, and then reimburse the people that contributed to that location originally, like a number of years ago. That doesn't even seem to make sense to me. Like, why? I mean, the arguments, I don't understand that argument at all. Am I missing something, or?
Well, it is inconsistent if it's back in the place where it was where it previously
Right.
had been, and the donations were to put it in that place.
And if it's done at the
It
city's
does
expense,
seem
what's the
inconsistent.
restitution?
It does seem inconsistent
Yeah.
at that point, but as I said, there are so many issues, there are a number of issues with the language of the proposed ordinance that would subject it to additional legal challenges that were not raised in the litigation up to now.
I know some questions were raised about in previous public comments, and again, not an attorney, and it surprised me because when you read the appellate court ruling, I didn't see this, but just for clarity, you know, and for our own sanity here, did any of the commissioners, did the opinion or the appellate court ruling state that any of the commissioners here violated the city charter?
No, not at all.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So we didn't violate the city charter.
No, the petition was rejected for legal grounds, and once it was rejected, it was not in the commission's ballpark, essentially,
Until
to
tonight.
take any action until the court order was made to require action by August 6th.
Okay. Commissioner Hott.
You said a number of times that certain things were not argued or made before the court. Can you explain why?
Commissioner Hunt? Yeah, maybe a little closer. Yeah, there we go.
Is that better? Okay. You said a number of times that there were arguments that were not made before the Court of Appeals or the Circuit Court in this case. Can you explain why those things were not made, or why those arguments were not made before the court? And is it because it deals with enforcement, which isn't really ready for argument at this point in time?
Yes, that's correct. Part of the one of the requirements for any legal action is that it be ripe, that a court can issue a decision that will affect the legal rights and responsibilities of the parties to the litigation, and that it can redress the and provide a remedy to the party seeking the remedy. In the case of initiatory ordinances, generally they any type of initiative, whether it's state law or local petition for ordinance, those are not subject to review as to the substance of the proposed ordinance until and unless they are passed. So any arguments about the substance of the ordinance itself could not be raised at this juncture. We were focused solely on the substance or the form of the petition, and whether the form of the petition itself satisfied state law and the charter, and any arguments related to the legality, constitutionality, conformity with the charter, things like that, of the proposed ordinance can only be made after the ordinance is passed, if it is passed.
Mr. Caldo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our city clerk has won multiple awards and recognitions. Our city clerk absolutely did not do anything wrong, correct? She followed the law as she was supposed to?
The city clerk acted on the legal advice of the interim city attorney, who was me at the time, and I had found several defects in the petition according to the charter and state law and case law interpreting both of those things. No, the city clerk did not act improperly at all. It is not uncommon for courts to be asked to require local officials to perform a duty that does not require any discretion on their part, and that's exactly what happened here.
Okay. Thank you.
So I just want to get some clarification. I think both of you bring some experience to the table and have an opinion on this, but I mean, in your, I mean, this is public in the case that you move forward with. This disconnect between the ballot language and what the ordinance does. We talked a lot tonight, getting questions answered about what the ordinance would actually do, what it would mean, but what's actually going to be in front of voters. In your opinion, is there a significant, in your opinion, your experience in this field, is there a disconnect between that ballot language and the ordinance language, or the ballot language is either incompetently written, or the ordinance is incompetently written, or it's misleading intentionally, in your opinion?
Well, the language of the petition did not fully explain what the proposed ordinance would do. For example, that it would require the city to move the monument back if it moved it after December 31st, 2020, that it would require reimbursement of any person who donated towards the movement of the monument in 2007, that it would require or permit standing of anybody, resident, group, business, citizen of Royal Oak to sue the city to enforce the ordinance. Those matters are not stated in the petition, but they are contained in the proposed ordinance. It would also repeal and replace the existing ordinance allowing the war memorial to exist in the Barbara Hallman Plaza, but the repealer is not stated on the face of the petition either. That was one of the principal arguments we made, because state law does require that repeal and replace language be on the face of a petition.
But again, the courts didn't consider this. They just considered the paragraph in the charter that said, well, even if all of this stuff doesn't jive, these things weren't considered.
The courts said essentially that the city charter governed, and the only thing that the city charter required the clerk to do was to count the signatures.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Dubuck's point, that would mean that, he used the firearm example, but you could have a petition that says, only males can own land in the city of Royal Oak, and then on the ballot language, the ordinance could say that, and on the ballot language, it could just say, this will help improve, land ownership, something that doesn't even reference what this is, material thing. And based on that opinion, that could be a similar case based on the argument. I'm trying to talk in extremes here to illustrate the issues.
Well, and the Court of Appeals did not address the extent to which the petition language reflected the actual content of the proposed ordinance. And that, I think your point is, as you said, an extreme one, but taking their reasoning to that extreme, you can reach that conclusion.
Mr. Mayor.
I was just going to say, the only other thing I would add to what Ms. McLaughlin said is that the Court of Appeals did address the petition heading, which is a separate component of the form of a petition. And the petition heading, they ruled that there was no requirement that it stick to the forms and the options that are presented in Michigan election law, which would be initiative to ordinance initiative, or initiative of legislation, or statutory initiative. Those are the approved under Michigan election law, the approved petition headings. This one had a more persuasive petition heading, and they said that wasn't improper, and there was no prohibition against that under the Royal Oak City Charter. So therefore, under that decision, you can have petition headings that includes language that is to persuade and increase the likelihood of getting people to sign the petition.
Which is in direct conflict to all the state laws that are out there to make sure that things are transparent to voters so they know what they're voting for.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Colo.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to clarify, there are, let's say, hundreds of words on this petition, and there will be 100 words on the actual ballot that people read at the polls, because that is the slanted language that was written by the petition drive organization to persuade people to sign this. And that will be the language that goes on the ballot, even though it might be less than truthful or incomplete.
The ballot summary that is contained on the face of the petition is what will be placed on the ballot.
That is written by the petitioner.
Yes,
Okay, so not the hundreds of words that include all these other provisions that are conveniently left out of that summary, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
Material things. Okay. Commissioner Dubut.
Sure. Just to put a fine point on it. The language that's proposed, as will be seen on the ballot, should this be placed on the ballot, essentially is designed to undo decisions that were made over a year prior to the first signature being gathered. So does that language explain, in your opinion, the extremity of the restriction on the public space to the reader?
The language on the face of the petition,
Yes. That the voters would see on the ballot.
or on the ballot, it simply says to prohibit other uses, but it doesn't expand on that or elaborate what that means.
Right, so folks would know that we couldn't have library functions for kids and stuff out there anymore.
Not according to what's just going to be on the ballot.
Okay. And it certainly doesn't make clear the wild amount of litigation it opens up the city to by giving everyone a right of action based on their interpretation of this ordinance.
That is not explained in the face of the petition.
All right. And does it make any reference to the extreme taxpayer expense of backtracking on decisions that were made 2 years prior?
No.
Okay. And the city has no ability to explain that on the ballot. The language goes on as is.
Not on the ballot itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Dubut.
Thank you. So the decision before us tonight is either to adopt this fatally legally flawed language as an ordinance or send it to the ballot. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes. That is the commission's job under the charter after certification by the clerk, which was done on July 23rd. The commission has 20 days within which to either adopt the ordinance as written or to place it on the ballot. And under court order, the commission is ordered to do that by August 6th.
Okay. So it's not a matter like when a petition is before the state legislature, they would reject it and then it would go to the ballot. We either vote to adopt or vote to send it to the ballot. Are those the two motions we should be considering?
I'm not sure I understand your...
Well, I wouldn't want a yes vote to send it to the ballot to be interpreted as any sort of support for this fundamentally flawed ordinance. So I'm wondering if in the case of the legislature, they vote no on a petition, it automatically goes to the ballot. What are our options?
That's different.
Right.
This is the commission is under charter either to pass the legislation as proposed or send it to the ballot. So you have an affirmative obligation to send it to the ballot if you don't pass it.
So the options of motions before us are both in the affirmative. Vote to send it to the ballot or vote to enact.
Correct.
Okay.
If you choose to do one. I mean, you don't have to do both, obviously, but.
Right.
Is there a third option?
Yeah, it just seems unusual. I mean, like if it has to go, if the charter says that it has to go to the ballot, why the commission would have to approve it. But I guess that's what's written in there. So it's a technicality, not an endorsement.
Correct.
So, clearly, in no way do I think that this language is in the interest of the citizens of Royal Oak or the city of Royal Oak. I think it's fundamentally flawed. I'm confident the voters are going to reject it for the many, many reasons that we've listed, and that even if it were adopted, It's so fatally flawed and chock full of contradictions with state law and our charter, it would be nearly impossible for the city to enact in its entirety. But given that the options before us are either to adopt it, which I absolutely will not, or send it to the ballot for the voters to reject, I will move to place this on the November ballot.
A motion by Commissioner Dubak. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. Discussion. Commissioner Prush.
We've discussed in prior meetings the cost of, let me back up a second. Contracts are underway and park construction is underway, and it's supposed to be finished by Halloween, by November 1st, thereabout. And so there will be areas within the dedicated space that is on the ballot that will be constructed with other stuff. It's not very much because it's primarily park space, but there's library plaza expansion areas in that area and some walkways and some other things that it would be in that area. I'm assuming that if the intent of the ordinance is to move it back to what it was and it could only be used for memorial purposes, some of that stuff would have to be removed. Mr. Brake, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any ballpark figures about how much that might cost to kind of remove what is under construction, in which what will be completed by November 1st, before the election?
So, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, to answer that question, we've had preliminary conversations. There has not been any specifications that have gone out, so we haven't bid this out. But what the construction manager is indicating to us, it's at a minimum of about $400,000, because it's not just moving the monument, it's removing what's being placed in that area that the ordinance is saying that it has to go back to. Furthermore, the park around that has to be redesigned. So you have designer's cost and to let out new construction bids to, in essence, to reconfigure that 20% of the park. It's not just a simple, lift it on a crane and placing it down. No, it's you have to remove that concrete. The concrete that's there was intended as a walkway, so you have to have additional consideration of a redesign. So that's where that $400,000 is what it would entail to finish that as a park and to restore that back to principally what it indicates as its original position, but it's still an active park. And those are the costs that are associated with that. So again, the minimum of the $400,000. And
when we had preliminary discussions with the DDA in terms of adding, like, for example, the restroom, and there was one other amenity that was under construction or under consideration from the DDA. The DDA essentially said to us, we are tapped out. We cannot contribute any more to this. And the city actually came forward and moved up some capital improvement funds to do the restroom. So that $400,000 thereabouts, the DDA who is paying for the construction of the park, I don't think has that money to expend to undo it. So that $400,000 would have to come out of the city budget?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm assuming that would come out of, who knows, but it could conceivably impact other construction activities in other parks if we were to assign that cost just, for example, to the parks budget?
So that's absolutely correct. So during the budget process that we would be reviewing other projects that were planned as part of the capital improvements, there's a finite number of dollars. So we would have to reprogram the budget. Any future improvements to other parks would be put on hold in essence, to pay for the commitments that are associated with this if this ordinance passes. So we'd have to reprioritize. It's not, let me clarify, these are not funds that are just idly sitting by. These would be reductions that we would have to make in order to pay for this.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. The argument that has been made is that, then you shouldn't have gone ahead with the construction of the park if you knew that this was going to happen. But we awarded contracts for the park in the first week of March, and we were not even informed that the petition drive was a possibility until like 2 weeks later. Contracts were already underway, contractors were already mobilizing, they were actually performing the contracts. if after we had gotten notification that, oh, guess what, we're going to circulate a petition, and we had to say, well, okay, we're just going to stop the contracts and put them on hold until, number one, we see whether or not you actually get the signatures, or number two, whether or not the voters actually pass it in November. I'm assuming that would have triggered contract damages for breach of contract or major change orders and all that kind of stuff for pausing those contracts that had been awarded. And I'm not asking you to put a dollar figure on it, but I can't imagine that that would be a small figure. Plus, it would have pushed the construction of the park into at least another construction season.
Sure. So you're jeopardizing that's $4 million plus the overall scope of the project. So that when the bids were awarded, there was time limitations that were associated with that when the work would have to be performed. And so that these contractors are lining up their workers and to mobilize equipment and alike, and so it's very disruptive. So if we had caused a pause, in essence, if we knew that prior to awarding the bids, that would be something entirely different. But since the bids were awarded, there's a contractual obligation that we have to move forward with the plan specifications that were outlined in the construction plans.
Okay. So my point is the timing of this is critical. Anything associated with this is going to cost the taxpayers money if it goes forward. Either if it had been put into effect earlier in the year, right after they made the announcement that the petitions were going to be circulated, or if it's passed in November, we're talking about big bucks and serious,
Yes.
serious cost to the taxpayers.
Right, and it'll take time to do the redesign. It's not just bring out a crane and move it back to this location. No, you have to redesign that. And so keep in mind this, when the plans were approved for the park itself, this came from the Downtown Park Planning Task Force, and that was January
2020.
of 2020. The bids were not let until November of 2020 that were subsequently awarded at the March meeting of the City Commission. So the point that I'm making is that you can see a considerable time lag between when that concept was approved. So let's, kind of speaking hypothetically here, if this were to be passed, it would not happen instantaneously. There would have to be consideration of removal, the demolition, the redesign, and to try to interpret this area, this memorial, this 20% area. So what can we construct, what can't we? It's obvious where the actual memorial goes, but the intent of the Downtown Task Force to still work within the remainder of that park, what does that look like? Do sidewalks end? How does that conform into the overall part of the park? That'll take some time to think through, and for the designer to come up with something. Again, it was said before, well, you can just simply design around it. It's not that simple. It's not that simple.
Anybody else? Commissioner Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor. Our legal staff confirmed earlier that the accusation that we as commissioners violated the city charter is in no way true. We have acted in the best interests of all of the people of Royal Oak and really had no role in this discussion in this matter up until now. I do find it ironic that the very people who would accuse us of violating the city charter have put us in a position that if this ordinance passes, we as commissioners will have to be forced to try to implement an ordinance that is so poorly written, so flawed, that we will be committing malfeasance if we actually enact this ordinance. I seconded the motion to place this item on the ballot, but I held my nose in doing it, and I personally hope that the voters of our city will have the common sense to see through this charade and vote against the ordinance.
Commissioner Perush.
I almost echoed Commissioner Douglas's comments verbatim, but I think I will add by saying I chair the Downtown Park Task Force. We had a 1.5-year process to get as much public comment on what the citizens of Royal Oak wanted in the park that we have ever done. We've never had that large of an engagement process. We had comments from 1,500 people. We conducted a public survey. We had meetings throughout the community and came up with a design that the public designed in a very democratic process. We gathered as much public opinion as we possibly could from veterans, from Girl Scout troops, from downtown businesses, from just members of the public who frequent the downtown and would like to see something in that area. 1,500 people. We had a survey that said that resulted in an 80% in favor ruling of moving the monument if it was done with respect, which I think the design does. And so it just pains me to see that we are in this position where we are violating what we thought was the most democratic process possible to get as much public opinion. And now we're faced with the possibility that this ordinance, if it passes, could turn that completely upside down and would restrict 20% of that park that the people commented on to a use that they didn't envision. None of those commenters ever envisioned anything like this. So, you know, the proponents of this are saying, oh, we're acting against the charter, acting as if we're acting undemocratically. What they're asking us to do is to overturn probably the most democratic process we've had in this community in years in terms of getting public opinion. And that to me is not only ironic, but I think it's very sad. I'm convinced that the voters are going to defeat this handily because it is so flawed and because there are so many provisions in it which are just, number one, unenforceable and are just against the public interest. We'll wait and see, but they'll have a clear choice. By the time that this is on the ballot, the park will be done. And the voters will be able to decide, do you want a park that you designed and you'll be able to use 100% of it? Or do you want a design where you can only use 80% of it and 20% of it is going to be used only for memorial purposes? And the voters will vote. It's up to them. And we'll see.
Commissioner Colo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, Commissioner Perush mentioned what an amazing, robust public input session it was and historic at the time, and it's only second to Norby Oaks, which was just a handful of years before that. And we all attended the charrettes, and now we have this amazing 40-acre beautiful park that's for the people of Royal Oak, by the people of Royal Oak. We did it together, and I'm sure everyone's taken walks there through the nature preserve, the splash pad, the new outrageously large playground that families love. Even my 2-year-old daughter, who should not go up it, goes up it all the time. But that is public input. That's what we came together as a community and did. And I'll tell you what, I am so proud that I had my input and design, that I was able to give input and design into this new downtown park. But I didn't do it up here. I did it when I was just, I was a citizen. I was not in an elevated position whatsoever. I went to the design. I gave my input. And I'll tell you, as a member of the library board, vice president at the time, we didn't have input into what the new terrace would look like. Now, we did send a letter and we attended public input sessions. However, there's a lot of designs that went to this, and we trusted our downtown park task force, and we trusted the people to show up and tell us what they wanted. Now, this park is so much more than the monument. Although this is the 5th move of the monument and the first time in its 100+ year history that's actually had a purpose-built spot. This is the first time we've said this is a space dedicated for veterans and we're going to design it. It's not in an alley like it was in prior years. It's not in a spot that's between a parking lot and some steps. It's in a purpose-built space that's absolutely beautiful and made to be accessible. This is the first time people can actually come up to it. I have MS. I might be in a wheelchair one day. I can roll up to it. Whereas right now, that's not possible with the old design. It had steps that were hard to navigate. But this park is so much more than that, and that's what we're voting on here. This park has a water feature that kids are going to love. It has a glade. If you've been on the parking deck, you've seen the huge piles of new dirt that's going in, so there could be a rolling feature. This park is for everyone. It is not for the few. It is for the many. And I am beyond excited for it. I know the people of Royal Oak are excited for it. We have 2.2 acres in a vibrant downtown that we made green. and we did it for everyone here. So I'm court ordered to vote for this tonight, and I will. I think it's a terrible, terrible ordinance. I think it's bad for the city, but I'm so excited for this park.
Thank you, Commissioner Colo. Anybody else? I mean, I think my fellow commissioners have said most of, I think, what us and the broader community are feeling. I think there were a lot of people that signed this with good intention, believing that, you know, it did certain things. And certainly, you know, when you look at the language itself, it does a lot of things that are adversely impact, I think, you know, the desires of almost everybody in this community when you break it down. And when we look at it, you know, I think it's important to call it out for what it is, you know, to evaluate it for what it is. The park design was done in January of 2020. The placement of the memorial was decided by the people. I like what Commissioner Colo said, designed by many people for the people. And between January and now, there's been 2 elections. There were three. There might have been 3 elections that this could have been put on if it was about changing the location. It could have been put on 3 elections before the city moved into contracts based on broad public opinion for the final park design. So the timing of this, of course, you know, indicates that this is not something that maybe warrants the merit of what it's suggesting on its surface. But that aside, in good conscience, I won't be voting for this at the ballot box at all. I think for the fact that it prohibits the will of the people that designed the park. It prohibits us to even legitimately have a Veterans Day. I mean, the fact that we have to question whether or not we can have a Veterans Day ceremony there. I mean, it was so, I don't know if that was intended to create chaos and confusion or if it was just so written so incompetently that, you know, it's just full of errors. And I mean, I don't know what the motivation was, and I don't want to speculate, but I mean, there's only 2 possibilities here. You know, I agree. I think voters will reject this. I think they understand that things aren't mutually exclusive. For folks that say, hey, I represent all the veterans in this community and I want the monument moved back, that's not true. I've had a significant number of veterans come up to me privately and say they are distraught over the actions, behaviors, public comment, you name it, and this petition about moving it. And they don't come out, they don't, you know, they keep their opinions to themselves. But, you know, I'll say if I'm just doing a count, more veterans have come to me expressing concern about this proposal than those who have come out to support it. So, in my opinion, this is just, I mean, for all the reasons that we gave tonight, it's just a mess. It's either incompetently written or written for the intent of creating maximum chaos and damage to the community. If it passes, it will cost hundreds of thousands, if not more, millions of dollars of potential liabilities, contract issues, you know, and it will restrict the use of the park, ironically, for the purpose of what this area was intended to be used for. So I can't make sense out of it. I don't think voters are going to make sense out of it. It troubles me and saddens me that the ballot language is inconsistent with what the actual ordinance says. But, you know, I think our voters in Royal Oak are smart. I think they're well read, and I think they'll take it for what it is. And we'll move forward as a community in a respectful way, in a dignified way, in a way where this park is not just amazing for Veterans Day and Memorial Day ceremonies, but it's amazing for everybody who calls this community home. So I don't know if there's any other comments. All right. Well, I'm going to call for the vote, and we're going to do a roll call vote on this. Just to be clear, it is a ballot initiative. I'm not sure that that's required, but that's what I'm going to demand. We'll start with the motion maker, which was Commissioner Dubuck, correct?
Correct.
So we'll start. Commissioner Dubuck, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote yes. Commissioner Perush,
Yes.
Commissioner Colo,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
and Commissioner Douglas.
Yes.
Okay. So this will be on the ballot, and we'll see where it goes. All right.
Mayor Fournier,
Yes.
I apologize, but I've got a family issue and I'm going to have to leave. So I'm going to scoot out of the meeting.
Completely understood, Commissioner Perush.
You all understand what's going on.
Yep.
I apologize to all of you, but I really do have to leave.
And I think we still have a quorum to move forward with. So good luck, Commissioner Perush.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item 8 on tonight's agenda, which is public comment. Same rules apply as normal. The City Commission values and relies on the input of our fellow citizens to make decisions. Now is the time set aside for the public to address the City Commission on any city-related issues, both on the agenda and not. As there are no public hearings scheduled for tonight's meeting, this will be the only time for you to address the City Commission. I ask that comments be directed to the City Commission and not to individual City Commissioners. If you wish to speak tonight at public comment, please wait until recognized by me, the Mayor, then come to the podium. For the record, you'll state your name and address. Please be mindful that the City Commission wants to hear from everyone who wishes to speak. Comments are limited to 3 minutes or less, and there is a timer at the podium to help you keep track of your allotted time. We ask that you don't interrupt other commenters while they're doing their public comment. Please note that the City Commission will not respond directly to questions during public comment. However, we are taking notes and will address those questions when, in this case, it's at the end of the agenda, but when topics are discussed. And we certainly refer things to the proper city department as needed. If you don't wish to speak tonight, that's all right. Don't hesitate. You can email us. That's always an effective way to make sure you are heard. All right. Mr. Wolf.
I never heard, Ron Wolf, 333 North Troy Street. I never heard such balderdash, such deceit and lies. I believe you'll find that the voters this November are not idiots, and will not believe you again as they believe you for the past, Mr. Ellison and then you, Mr. Fournier. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Imagine you're a veteran returning to your hometown to find that your city has declared you the enemy only because you asked that your monument remains, as agreed upon, remains sacrosanct. The courts have seen through you. In 27 of 30 points, they found you faulty. They have literally recommended your impeachment. You don't have to be impeached. We have this November election coming up. I recommend to the voters, please do not support any of these incumbents and their enabling assistant traitors to our veterans and our democracy. We need to get rid of this albatross of a commission that's entrenched in the pockets of special interests such as Ron Bogie, John Witz, and bars. All they're interested is in moving this memorial. The only reason is to have open alcohol carry events that will just add more problems for the people in our city. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Voters, we know you're not idiots. I'm not an idiot. This November, have a clean sweep. We finally have a bunch of stalwart, qualified candidates opposing. Do not support any incumbent. Do not split your vote. Vote only for non-incumbents this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Who's next? Mr. Harrison.
Thank you. Bill Harrison, 2729 traffic. Well, I sat there. I only have 3 minutes. You had a whole hour to spew out misinformation and, well, I forgot the other word. I'm having a Biden attack. Commissioner Perush mentioned misfeasance and malfeasance. Several weeks ago, if not months ago, I used the same words to describe the current ordinance I was on the DDA at the time and was one of the leaders in getting that property dedicated. And at that time, there was a letter sent to the city attorney that directed him to create an ordinance that would preserve the location of that monument. And then, so based on the opinion that it doesn't maintain the existing or the original location of that monument, then that would be misfeasance. He didn't do his job. And if he's misinterpreting what he originally intended to do, that's malfeasance. So, and any costs, Mr. Brake, that the city incurs by continuing to develop the park, knowing that there's a possibility that the voters will cause this monument to be restored, then that's up to you. That's your action. That's not the action of the people who have asked.
Talk to the body as a whole and not the individual folks, please.
Yeah, I hear you.
Thank you.
I'm just appalled at the action that you folks are taking and trying to misdirect the public on the intent of this ordinance and the substance of this ordinance, and it's just disappointing. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Terry Myers on Roland Avenue. I'm just going to wing this. First, the survey on the park that you could take, I took that like 10 times. I don't think that's accurate. Second, I'm not sure if the park ever had the memorial left where it was in the design. I could be wrong, I don't remember. So wondering why that was not an option, why it had to be moved. Third, listening to you going back and forth about these legalities with this lawsuit, I thought the job of the city clerk was to verify signatures, and that was it. She had done that, and if it would have gone from there to the city commission table, not sure if you would have had a lawsuit or not. You knew about the lawsuit, and then you moved the memorial the day after, which I didn't understand that. As you sit here and you talk amongst, well, yourselves and out to the audience, you've talked a lot about almost like it's the public's fault we're in this situation, or at least the petitioner's fault that we're in this situation. Your main concern was the wording on the ballot or the petition, and I get that. But did I not understand somebody say that when it goes to the clerk, the Oakland County clerk for the ballot writing, it gets reviewed or something? No? I misunderstood that? Oh, okay. Okay, well, so that was that. I see that you really faulted the petitioners, and I feel bad that you feel that way. In my opinion, if it would have just been taken care of by verifying the signatures and heading from there, maybe we wouldn't be in this position. But I don't want you guys to also look like little angels up there either, because I know a big part of it was if you just would have listened to what was being said from the public, maybe it wouldn't have gotten this far with all the legalities. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Anybody else? Going, oh, Ms. Anderson. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Wallace Anderson, 404 Mount Vernon Boulevard. What I'd prepared is definitely not what I'm going to say. So I'm going to say very quickly that the study for this park was seriously flawed. I mean, I'm a researcher. I know how research studies get designed. And this was fundamentally very flawed. I was a part of it. I went to one of the stakeholder meetings as a president of a homeowners association. And there weren't very many of them, and there were not very many homeowners people there. There were as many city employees at that meeting as there were those of us in the community. And a lot of it was very free form. There was nowhere ever in this process did anybody seem to know that they were dealing with about 2.2 acres to design a park. The grandiose ideas for that kind of space led people to think there was a lot of stuff that could be done that really couldn't. This description of all the public input is embarrassing too. I mean, maybe if it was 1,500 comments that were gotten, that's out of 60,000 people in the city, and we have no way of knowing whether they were the same people. We have no way of knowing who they were. We know for a fact, because we ask regularly to have veterans specifically involved from the beginning, and were rejected. Were not complete, and they had a big stake, and nobody in their right mind could have not understood that they did. And I think that's been part of my problem all along, is that from the beginning, this task force was very carefully selected to exclude people who didn't agree with the city commissioners. I see how you've regularly selected members of the different committees in the city to exclude people who didn't go along with you. And you were notified all along from different people coming to public comment especially how many objections there were. This was not something that the community designed. I'm just very disappointed in you.
Thank you. Who's next? Yep.
Suzanne Chambers, Hudson Street, Royal Oak. First of all, I have never heard any reason. You can't hear me?
We got it.
Oh, okay. Is there an on and off switch to this?
It sounds a lot better now.
Pardon me?
You sound a lot better now.
Oh, thank you.
Now I gotta get to mine.
Thank you. I've never heard of reasoning as to the moving of the memorial from its original positioning. So I would like to hear that be printed or stated somewhere. So if in fact the city leaders or whatever decided that that was inappropriate, that position, the original position, which was wonderful, in my opinion, I've attended many times, then why would the citizens be responsible? Why would we take the blame for this? The expense that you decided to take to move it for whatever reason, I don't know anyone that knows the reason, that is on you. That is not on the residents, the taxpayers. You obviously we're more than generous. Look at these lavish buildings that we're being just now introduced to. So it isn't that the taxpayers cost all this expense that you're speaking to, the thousands of dollars. That's on you guys. You moved it. That was a perfectly wonderful position. You owe us a reason for moving it and costing we the taxpayers, not you, we the taxpayers will pay for this debt. And as far as when somebody said, Mr. Colo, something about an elevated position you weren't in.
I have to have you address the whole body.
Okay, well, I'm just referring to a comment that was made by one of the body members, that he wasn't at an elevated position. Well, the residents of this community own this city. This is our city. We should be asked about what you're going to do with our money. This is our money that you're using, without even consulting with us. That's really upsetting to me. And so this is not our fault. This entire catastrophe lies with your decision-making. Again, I say we don't need to apologize because we certainly have put a lot of money into this city, and we'll continue, no doubt, to have more tax increases. And as far as I heard a comment made about it's a matter of public concern by one of the attorneys, oh, yes, it is a matter of public concern. We, the voters. I just have a couple of other things about the whole idea of client privilege that really frustrates me. This is our issue. That client, that attorney conversation with you people should have been with the people of the city, the ones that this will cost money. Private. Client privilege, how insulting. I have to collect my thoughts here. All right.
Chambers, I'll have you finish your last thought. I'm giving you a little bit more time because we started a little
thank you.
slow
I appreciate that. So I guess that I'm just saying to you that the original location was absolutely perfection. I'd like to know what type of influence was enforced into this whole decision by the builders and all of the rest. And we know that that's a very deep subject. So I look forward to the public, the wonderful public voters that are highly intelligent in Royal Oak. I've been here a long time. I know that for a fact. Thank you for your time.
Who's next? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is John Galetka, 402 Royal Avenue. You should have honored the residents' vote in 2007 who understood that they were voting to leave the memorial in its place. The directive you've been given from the court shows that you've been operating illegally against the law in violation of the city charter, even with all your whining, mischaracterizations, and expensive legal maneuvering. You violated the city charter in the past also at the time of the $59 million bond issue for the city project, city center project, which should have gone to a city vote then, and you chose not to. Other cities get to vote. Birmingham voted on theirs, which they turned down, but you did not allow the citizens to vote that time either. I have to make a comment on actually your comment regarding this had been going on, you, Mr. Mayor, as far as your timing and why wasn't this put on other ballots. I sat in those meetings, those public meetings, and your decision to go with the one that you chose by moving the memorial came after, strategically, it came after the last election. You let that go until after the election, and then you voted on it. And you heard many people protesting that, but you went ahead and did what you wanted to do. There was no surveys. I don't think there was any results that said that it should be moved. There was a lot of people that said don't move it. Even within your surveys, a lot of people said don't move it. I went through what you have online there, and I found 4 people that said move it. One was Mr. Ron Boji, and there was 3 others. One said move it, but ask the veterans first, and another one said move it to Memorial Park. Another one said move it. So there was 4 people, and there was hundreds of people that said no, and there was thousands of people in 2007 that you should have gone back to. I have to say another thing that I remember from the last election. Right after the election, when it came, as you guys were being sworn into office, only one person, Randy Lavasser, took a pledge to swearing to support the city charter. None of you did. You can go back and it was a really silly meeting because you went on for about 10 minutes saying why it was absolutely not necessary for you to take a pledge to uphold the city charter because it's in your job description. Yes, you as well. So
you have to address the body.
Okay, well, you're looking like you're puzzled, but this is what you did. You would not swear to uphold, that was words that would not come out of your mouth. And you haven't. And you have showed us time and again that that is not something that you honor. I think the people would like to have their city back, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Tom Roth, 2326 Marywood Drive. I want to thank you, City Commission, for the very well-scripted discussion you had up here earlier today, but I digress. I'm going to stick to my statement that I wrote out earlier. 4 judges have now told you what should have been clear to you from the beginning. Government officials are not free to ignore the laws they find inconvenient. The veterans group followed the rules. You should have as well. But despite you spending tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars in legal fees trying to take away voters' right to decide yes or no whether to adopt the veterans' proposed ordinance, voters will get the chance anyway. This isn't just about the Veterans Memorial or where it will be located. It's about whether government officials are accountable to follow the rules, to abide by the laws that protect our citizens' rights to have a say in the operations of our own government. It's a shame that you don't value those rights. A couple of things are clear from these historic events. First, citizens can fight City Hall. We do not need to accept a government that is not responsive to our concerns. Second, the government is accountable to follow the law. The judges made clear that what you did in making excuses not to certify the veterans' petition was wrong and would not be tolerated by our justice system. It's a shame that all of the time, effort, and money devoted to fighting the veterans on this issue could have been avoided had you simply shown empathy for our citizens and leadership in looking for a solution. But either you never took the time to learn why so many residents cared so deeply about preserving our memorial, or you just didn't care. Either way, it's a shame. Had you put forth just a fraction of the effort, talking with veterans, perhaps you would have found a solution that would not have alienated so many within our community. We have a great city. We have many passionate, kind people in our community who freely give their time to make it a better place. We have a community that values our wonderful neighborhoods, that enjoy a great quality of life, but our government needs to do a better job listening to and addressing the concerns of the people who live here and make our city great. Government service is about serving the people, not pursuing your own personal agenda. Perhaps some of you have been in office too long to remember that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who's next? Who's next? All right. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Is that Ms. Hennessy? Come on up.
I am so upset right now. I wasn't going to come up here, but I have to. I can't believe the things you say because I know they're lies. I began the process of moving the monument to where it is today, or where it was until you moved it. The citizens of this city donated their time and money to get this memorial moved because it was in an alleyway. You couldn't hear at the services. So I came to the commission with Mayor Ellison, and he says, by all means, if you can come up with the money, go ahead, we need to have it moved. So we got the money. It took us over 3 years. We got it moved, and it was a beautiful sight. And anybody can tell you, and especially the veterans, they were so happy they had a place where they could come and reflect on their times and on their brothers and sisters. It was all done by our citizens. Once we got it moved, and Mayor Allison was behind us 100% to get it on the ballot, to get it dedicated so it couldn't be moved again by anybody else, because it had been moved around 4 times, or that was the 4th time. And just because you want to put a park in it doesn't mean you get to move that monument. The voters voted 90% to pass that law, that it would be a charter amendment. and you people disrespected it completely. And I will go back to the first time it was brought up about the park. I went to the architect, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now, on 11 Mile that was in charge of this. And I said, do you know this land is dedicated? He said, no, nobody told me that. So then when you had the thing at Farmers Market where you could vote on what proposal, which diagram you wanted, I asked the architect, do you know this is dedicated land? And he said, no. So then I said, why can't you leave it where it is? And he said, we can. All we have to do is change the plans. So all this BS that you guys are saying is a bunch of BS. I am so upset.
Ms.
The
Henderson,
veterans are
finish
so
your final
upset.
statement.
Oh, I'm tired of that. You know what? You only care about yourselves. You don't care about the citizens of Royal Oak.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hennessy. Mr. Wolf, you know the rules. Mr. Wolf, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Wolf. We have to show respect for everybody here. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Now, come on, sir. We've been over this. All right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Pat Mason, 306 North Connecticut. Quite a dog and pony show you put on here tonight, arguing about the amendment, the proposal, and the charter amendment and all that, when in reality, the reason for this petition drive was because of your actions, not ours. I'm sick and tired of circulating petitions to getting things put on the ballot. You won't let the people vote on it. You want to dictate what goes on in this city. And we're going to change that November the 2nd. The only way we're going to change this process is to change the city commission. So you people know what to do November the 2nd. Vote them out.
All right, anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to bring the meeting back to this side of the table. Commissioner Goodbuck.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know we don't usually do this, but there was a couple specific questions asked that I thought were definitely worth noting. One sincere question is, was there ever a proposal for keeping it where it was? Clearly there was. The Downtown Task Force had robust discussion about multiple proposals. I'm looking at a story published in the Royal Oak Review in December of 2019, which actually details those discussions and the back and forth between the various stakeholders about whether or not to move it. So, and I believe the Royal Oak Review is delivered to every home in the community. So there were multiple proposals considered at the more than a dozen meetings of that body over about a year and a half during the public engagement process. At those meetings, veterans did come forward, provide public comment, and you can watch the video of those meetings. The folks at the table really give consideration to that input and how it actually impacts the design. So folks disagreeing with the final result, yeah, we're going to disagree. There's 60,000 of us in this city. But to pretend none of that happened is just a not accurate representation of reality. The reasoning was never stated. Someone mentioned the reasoning is actually clearly laid out in these meetings. If you watch the meetings, the public meetings that happened over that time. And again, this is just one article. There was multiple articles published during this long process in multiple newspapers about the back and forth of design. So again, this is Royal Oak Review. It goes to every house in the city, and there's a long write-up about the discussion on the memorial placement. And then lastly, the survey showed that people were open to moving it so long as we treat it respectfully within its designated area. Now, you can interpret that how you want, but if you watch these meetings, no one started out wanting to move the memorial. It was a natural conclusion of the public input in the process. So again, I thought that was a sincere question, so I'm answering it. There was multiple proposals brought forward by the designer, and this was the one decided on by the task force in December of 19. So just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to clear up, there seems to be just a little bit of confusion out there too about the 2007 ordinance, and I know that question came up as well about whether or not the monument could be moved or not. And Mr. Gillum was our city attorney at the time. He clarified that as long as the monument was within the Barbara Hallman Plaza, that was acceptable. And I think the proof that you see in that is that we actually have a petition out here that would replace and repeal that ordinance. If it were a matter of violating the ordinance, we'd have a lawsuit against the city that said, hey, you violated your own ordinance and you need to stop doing that. And that's not what we have in front of us. We have a petition that actually goes and changes the ordinance from allowing it in that area to move it to a specific spot. So I know people feel aggrieved by that, but I want you to know, regardless of how you feel about the placement of the memorial, because reasonable people can disagree on the placement of a memorial, it's not that we violated the law. We had public input sessions, and at the end of it, we did get input, and you know, the bodies that are here decided to go into a direction that some people, you know, and either way, if you go the other way, then you'd have people saying, well, why are you keeping it here? And so there's no win. But when it comes back to the 2007 ordinance, I just want people to feel rest assured that there's no violation of that ordinance, or that's what the lawsuit should have been against the city, but it's not the case. So I would just want to make sure that folks understand that. And I think that, you know, again, just I know we're all passionate about the park. We're passionate about and I know you guys may not want to believe it, but I can tell you every single person up here wants to make sure we have a dedicated and respectful place for the monument. We want to make sure it's accessible to everybody. I want to be able to go there, take my kids there, teach them about history, teach them about Royal Oak history, and you know where it's at. I understand people disagree, but when it comes to the court order too, there are some things saying about Royal Oak not honoring the law, not following the charter. I mean, you have it's irrefutable that you know that's not the case. You know, now if we didn't put it on the ballot tonight, that might be an argument. But I just want to make sure people understand, if we're going to have disagreements, let's talk about the facts. You know what I mean? And you know, trust each other about the facts. So I do think, and I feel, and I appreciate the sincere questions and comments, because we're not always going to agree. If I agree with anybody out there 100% of the time, or you agree with me 100% of the time, we should get restraining orders, because that's just, you know, crazy if people agree all the time. But, you know, we have to look at the spirit of what this is. The survey, like Commissioner DeBuck said, I know there's some questions about the scientific nature of it, you know, people doing it 10 times or whatever. We had that same discussion. We actually had a professional firm manage this, and there's ways with IP addresses you can bump people out. Is it absolutely, you know, perfect? Did we interview all 60,000 people? No, but if you have 10 people coming to public comment saying, I don't like this, and you have 600 people saying, this is the design I want, I mean, there is a margin of error in there. You know, so, you know, I think we feel pretty confident that, you know, we received good public input that, by frankly, we didn't have to get, but because we want to know what the public wants, we opened up that process. So, and I understand some people aren't going to like the result of that or like, you know, the ultimate decision, and that's understandable. Reasonable people can disagree, but it doesn't mean that, you know, one party's stupid and one party's smart, or one party's corrupt and the other one isn't. No, it just means we disagree. Just all the time, people disagree. So, I wanted to clarify a few of those things. I don't know if there's anything else I missed, because I do feel like tonight there were some genuine questions that you know. And if you need any access to any of that, if you don't want to believe me, there's videos out there, there's things like that. We can build your confidence and point you in the right direction so you can see for yourself. More than willing to do that. Anybody else? All right. Well, I know it's kind of late. Oh, Commissioner Douglas, I'm sorry.
We adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second by Commissioner Dubak? Any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we're adjourned. And thank you for sticking with us tonight.